Welcome everyone. Welcome to this special War on Men video. And as many of you know, I usually put out spiritual content. I will not have it in this video because I don't want to get a deer in the headlights, right, with astro nerding out on people. So if you're interested in that content, please follow me for that. Otherwise, let's get into this. If you didn't see the War on Women video that I put out last month, please check it out. I will have a link to it at the end of this video. And hopefully I won't be repeating a lot of the same, right? I really want to round this topic out and talk about men in this video, and especially with this month, right? It's Father's Day coming up this month, and somehow now it's become the month of Pride. And you know, there's been now we're in full swing with rainbows everywhere, and a boycott going on, a Pride rainbow boycott going on, and the Go Woke Go Broke movements in full effect as well, which has brought about a lot of increased awareness about ESG scores, DEI, BlackRock, Larry Fink, things like that becoming household names like never before. Talked about it in the last video if you want to know more about it, and how money is influencing, and I'm talking big money, is influencing and driving these narratives and these campaigns. Make sure you check out that video. If you want to know my 2 cents, I think I see a revival coming. I think I see more people wanting to tap into traditional masculinity, femininity archetypes, which I think is a beautiful thing. I'll explain why later as we get into this video. But yes, right now in this video, we're going to talk about men's issues, especially wounded masculines. Yes, obviously I am not a man, so I cannot, speak for men. I try to understand them, right? But I feel like it wouldn't be fair for us to talk about the war on women without talking about the war on men, because as I said in the last video, my personal belief is that the war on women started with the war on men, and you really cannot have a conversation without talking about the other. We're all interconnected, we're all affected, and so let's talk about the war on men. Let's go deeper into things that I touched upon in the last video, which is the fatherlessness epidemic, wounded masculinity, how it has impacted women and children, where it's coming from. I will say, yes, we're probably going to talk about cultural Marxism here. Yeah, get ready for that. We're going to go there. And most importantly, what can we do about it? And if you come up with some ideas, put them in the comments down below, because I definitely want to hear your feedback. Okay, so before we really get into this, let me get some things out of the way, because I'm afraid that if I don't address these things up front, then everything else I say is going to be seen through this lens of hate and discrimination, because a lot of you have been conditioned to do that and you're not even aware of it. So you can't even hear truth, you can't even hear what people are saying, because certain phrases are, oh, she's being hateful, oh, she's discriminating, and then you just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you can hear no more of it, right? So let me first say that me speaking out about the trans movement is not about discrimination or hate. And I know some of you have been conditioned to see it completely different. So I hear you. Can you please hear me? There are actually lesbians, gays, bisexuals who agree with me. For example, the group Gays Against Groomers.
This flag does not represent me. Good evening. My name is Frank Rodriguez, and I'm the Executive Director of Operations for Gays Against Groomers. The reason that I'm here is to show support in regards to deciding to not fly the gay flag during June. I'm a 31-year-old gay man pushing back against the hijack agenda of the LGBT Incorporated. The pride flag, this flag, does not represent me. When you're a conservative gay and you have conservative traditional values, it doesn't represent you. I am tired of this community trying to represent me and the millions of people that support people like me. Gays Against Groomers represents millions of like-minded LGBT members. And the people in this building are upset because they think that they're being marginalized. Do you see Chinese people in here upset that we're not flying the Chinese flag on Chinese New Year's? Or how about Cinco de Mayo when the Mexicans got their independence? Do you see Mexicans in here upset? No. You see my community, the gay people that want to be marginalized, that make victims of ourselves. This flag that I'm standing on no longer represents me. This is not your fault. I'm not yelling at you. I'm upset because people like this are constantly representing my community. They make us look like fools. They make us look dumb. And I'm tired of it. This flag does not represent everyone. With liberty and justice for all. That flag, this flag, the American flag, 13 stripes and 50 stars represent this, represent us, not this, not this. And if the gay community would wake up, we wouldn't have this pushback. Stop indoctrinating children and these types of things wouldn't happen. One more thing. Do you know where I can find a trash can?
I'm a straight white guy just like you, and I have no hate for other people. You wake up every day and hate people. How do you have energy for this?
No one hates
Go
anyone.
home.
I'm a gay man, and I don't want you people speaking for me, cutting up fucking children. At what age does a little girl have the right to a double mastectomy? You don't fucking speak for me. You straight liberals, you don't control shit.
There's even some drag queens, shockingly, who are like, why are you taking your children to drag shows?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I agree with this drag queen. Listen.
I have no idea why you want drag queens to read books to your children. I have no idea. What in the hell has a drag queen ever done to make you have so much respect for them and admire them so much? Other than put on makeup and jump on the floor and writhe around and do sexual things on stage. I have absolutely no idea why you would want that to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or a porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. A drag queen performs in a nightclub for adults.
What is your problem? All right. Even drag queens are warning that this is not okay. All right. And so I think that people need to not look at this as such a black or white, right or wrong issue. There's more nuance to it. There are actually people in the LGBT, well, yes, T, but not a lot of them, but there are some people who agree with me. There are groups of them out there. If you search and you hear them out, you will understand this is not just a cis female or whatever label you want to put on me perspective. And another issue is that people, even within the homosexual community, LGBT community, have warned that all of the other letters that follow thereafter in the acronym, never before did they demand of society or culture to change the language and to grant them special accommodations. And so this is something very unusual that's going on, that we're reaching a point in history where this is not about being inclusive, as they like to say. This is not about being kind, as they like to say, but it's more about getting the culture to change itself, its language, to accommodate what amounts to less than 3% of the population.
If you want to be transgender, I don't even fucking have a problem with that, and nobody else does. Nobody cares. Here's what they care about. You shoving it in everybody's fucking face everywhere they fucking look, saying that you're the most protected class of society, and you're saying you're the most villainized. Well, the reason you're getting heat now is because now motherfuckers are getting to the point where they're running into schools and killing people because of the perceived hate that they're getting, when in reality you wouldn't even get the hate if you just leave the kids alone. This isn't hard to understand, but the reason they won't leave the kids, why won't they leave the kids alone? Why would a grown man dress like a woman? And because you don't ever see it the other way around. You don't ever see women dressed as men doing the fucking dances and shit. It's always fucking men dressed as women doing the fucking dances in front of kids. And the real shit is we have a whole infiltration of pedophiles doing this shit, and y'all motherfuckers are celebrating and enabling it, and it's bad. And people hate it. And guess what? They're not gonna fucking take it forever.
Also, I am going to say something here, make no mistake, and I make no apologies for it. I am old school. I really am. I am not going to sit here and go along with the narrative that men are women or women are men. They're not the same. We are not the same.
If you were born a boy, you stay a boy. Girls are girls right from the start. When you're born a girl baby, you grow up to be a bigger girl and then a woman. Only girls can grow up to be the mummies. Only boys can grow up to be the daddies.
Am I saying that one is better than the other? No, I am not. But I came up Generation X during a time in history when, you know, John Gray's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, you know, was on the best-selling book list, you know, and he's a psychologist who was basically talking about the differences between men and women on a physiological level. And this was not anything shunned or taboo. This was like commonly accepted. And I also grew up during a time frame where psychological research came out demonstrating that one of the differences that men have from women physiologically is that they think of sex every 10 seconds, sometimes less, sometimes 6 or 7, okay, seconds. They are thinking of sex. Does this mean they're bad people? No, but it is how they're wired, and we need to respect and honor one another's differences, which unfortunately I think this new trendy way of thinking does not, unfortunately. So I do think that we are equal, but we're different. That's just my Gen X thinking. It's not politically correct. I make no apologies for it. I personally feel that the more that we acknowledge and accept and honor one another's differences, the more that we integrate our shadows, the darker aspects of our masculine, feminine energies, the better we utilize them for ourselves and in partnership and in family dynamics, and you fill in the blank. And we come to a point where we're living at our highest potential as authentic masculines or feminines, whichever you genetically, chromosomally are, okay? And then we have better relationships as a result, okay? So again, I don't claim in this video to understand what it means to be a man. I actually have no interest in being a man. You know, I have 3 daughters. Matter of fact, one of them told me after working a year, and she really wanted to work. She wanted her first job, and I let her have it. And after working her first year on a job out in the real world and filing her taxes like a real adult, she came back and she said, you know what, I actually don't really want these jobs. These men can have them. Is it wrong for me to say that I just want a good man to go work that job for me and take good care of me, and I'll take care of these kids in the home? And again, it's not politically correct, but these are honest to God thoughts of women who are really being honest with themselves about their energy and what they really want, if they're being supported in doing that.
I had closer friendships with random women I met in the bathroom before I transitioned at clubs because of how open women are than I've had in my 8 years of transitioning. Because women are just so much more vulnerable and deep than men. But to have known, and I think a lot of trans men feel this, is we knew what depth felt like before we transitioned. We knew what it felt like to like have people want to hug us. And to have people want to talk to us. And to have a community. And then you transition and you're just a guy walking down the street that people cross the street so that they're not near you. And friendships are so much harder to build. And people are colder. What's hard is none of this invalidates how real and raw women and people who are in marginalized groups feel about cis white men. All of that's valid. But I also now understand why the suicide rate is so much higher in men. Because this shit is lonely. And I'm an emotionally mature man. I know how to build friendships, and it is still really, really hard. Try to think about how you can, in your small little community where you feel safe, can reach out to the men in your life and just help them feel maybe seen for a moment. Or do little conversations to help their emotional maturity so that they can reach out to people and have deeper guy friendships.
I think that if you go back and look at like the video I put out a couple years ago about healing divine feminine energy, I think you can see I make a pretty strong case for an argument that we're not really built for this. It's not that we can't do it, that we can't go out there and compete with other women and other men, that we can't strive, that even some of us women, don't have, a drive or a motivation within us to do that. We do, okay? But again, physiologically, going back to John Gray, is this how we're wired? Is this what we are best suited for? And it's not that you should take choices away from women or men or prescribe how people should behave, but to me, real women's liberation is that I have the choice if I want to go out there and compete with men or not. And as it stands right now, we don't have the choice. So I would argue we really didn't get liberated from damn near much, now did we? But I digress, because I covered that topic in the last video. So, and I will also say that one of the differences that I feel between men and women are that, generally speaking, right, there are always exceptions. Please don't come at me in the comments about this. Generally speaking, women, they value security, loyalty in men, and mastery. And so as we get into talking more and more about men maybe stepping into this role, I'm going to kind of hit on those things, while also keeping in mind that for men, a lot of what is part of their value system, as far as I've come to know and learn, is honor and respect. But again, how do they arrive at that place where they are legitimately being respected and honored because they have earned it, right? Meritocracy. They have done something to be competent, which has given them a place of confidence. How do men arrive at this point? It's going to be really hard for a man to get a woman's respect, or even the respect of another man, if they're engaged in what we see going on at a much larger scale than ever before, which is, this trans agenda, because it's making people think, what the hell is going on with men? I mean, I know I thought, like, what in the heck is going on with these men? And arguably, it could be mental illness. And I mentioned that in the last video, but I want to talk more about it, right? Obviously, we talked in the last video about the trans massacres, the aggression, where you're seeing men who are transing to be women going into female prisons, female women's domestic violence shelters, or even just women's bathrooms. You're seeing a lot of rapes, pregnancies, lawsuits coming out of this. But even on a more immediate scale, we're seeing a lot more headlines of students or female workers in the workplace going into women's bathrooms and finding men in there. And in some cases, these are men who are taking pictures of little girls. In some cases, these are men who have gotten very aggressive, or maybe they're not aggressive, but if they get confronted about why are you in here, they are becoming very hostile and aggressive. And I'm even seeing some incidences where if the police are called, the police are siding with the trans woman and investigating biological females for discrimination and hate crimes for complaining or raising an issue about these men. I'm hearing a lot more people, in the mental health profession talk about where is this anger and hostility coming from, and the resentment towards women, like, at the protests that I mentioned before with Posey Parker or Riley Gaines, where we keep seeing these repeated themes of biological male aggression openly directed towards biological females. It's a trend, it is a pattern. What is happening, and what you see a lot of people now discussing is a phenomena or a mental health disorder called gynophilia, okay? And reports coming out showing that trans women's mothers are often bipolar, narcissists, depressives, okay? So, as I mentioned before, do we really understand what is going on with this population? Do they have unresolved mommy issues? Gotta put it out there. And then when we get into this whole gynophilia thing, you know, this is some wild, wacky stuff, you know, where it's like, okay, I've never really explored this topic before until now, where I started understanding, oh my gosh, this is like a form of narcissism where these men, they just get off on themselves, okay? This, particularly when we're talking about trans women, biological males who dress up as women, but they want to sleep with women still, and they call themselves lesbians, okay? They get off on themselves, okay? They get like almost like a narcissist is very ingrown, very self-concerned. They get themselves off. They're into fetishism and eroticism having to do with themselves, not really another person.
I talked about autogynophilia and how it affects my life, and instead of wanting that girl, I imagined myself being that girl and masturbated.
Risk is a big aphrodisiac, you know. And I mean, the first time I went out in my mum's clothes was very, very exciting, and I became addicted to that.
There was a time when I had really thought Gabby shouldn't be in the light, so to speak, that this was a fetish.
Yes. So I have genderequality bonus. Yes, basically. And I'm a woman and autogynophilia myself. Yes, and I'm personally sexually attracted to idea of being a woman myself, and I'm a woman. In my opinion, everyone can be woman. Also, why not? Why not? Everyone can be woman. Everyone.
Autogynophilia is a man's love of oneself as a woman. And as Donovan Cleckley proposes, exists at the intersection of autoeroticism, fetishism, and narcissism. A physiological and psychological condition specific to male sexual development that depends on men's sexual objectification of women.
Why are we not helping these men with their psychological problems? Why are we instead telling them to, yeah, go on, you know, and chemically, surgically castrate yourself, mutilate yourself, and shaming other people for trying to talk them out of it and get some actual mental health care for this, right? Rather than mutilating themselves. We've also got this culture now that is coming out of this community where it is okay for grown men to relate to children in a very sexualized way. And I've said this, I've been saying this for a couple months now. Why is it suddenly okay for men in dresses presenting as highly sexualized females? Why is it okay for them to be in schools and libraries and God only knows where, out in public? And it never was before. It was never okay before until now. And now you're a bad person if you disagree with this. Why also are they so interested in getting attention from children? Is this how men relate to children these days? You have to dress up in a skirt, you know? And I mean, it's some wildness, all right? And then you look at these drag queen events, these drag shows, and you're going to see a common, let's just point it out, shoot the messenger if you want, but I'm going to say the ugly truth, and it's not going to be politically correct, but you tell me it's not true, okay? These drag queen shows are predominantly attended by single, white, liberal, overweight mothers.
Can I ask you a question? Do you find this to be age appropriate for your children?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little more, I'm not as conservative, but I mean, really, it's not any different than, I mean, Disney, they have similar things. Like, it's really not that far from it.
I had sex with my father's boss in my father's office.
Honestly, like, I'm body positive.
Minty fresh.
Do you find this to be age appropriate for children?
Do I find this to be age appropriate?
Yeah.
For my child, yeah.
Hello, you're reaching for my titties. Are you hungry?
Do you mind me asking how old she is?
She's 12.
This is the new trend now. You have these woke suburban moms taking their children to, in this case, it was a Christmas drag show, but in many cases, it's a drag brunch where they sip mimosas and get tipsy while their children get sexualized in the process. And it's just a really, really devastating thing for American children here.
Are they trying to be cool? Are they trying to be progressive as they see it? What is the motivation for going along to events like this with their children?
There is a large subset who they have just totally fed into this religion of wokeism, and they are literally sacrificing their children at the altar of wokeism. These women think that they are doing absolutely nothing wrong, and they just roll over and say, well, they're going to learn about it anyway.
Where are their fathers? What is going on with the fathers? And again, I'm going to go back to that research of, can somebody please help these women?
My mom doesn't matter if I am gay or lesbian or any of that. She doesn't care. All she cares about is that I'm a part of it. And if I'm not a part of it, she'll try to convince me to join it. Cause
What are you saying right now?
Facts.
That I would convince you to join what?
The LGBTQIA+.
Notice how the mom panicked right there because she was on live. There's no deleting what was just recorded. It was screen recorded by someone in the chat. The moment her kids started saying that, she was like, oh shit, no. I think it was like Gallup poll that came out and said 7-point-something% of Americans identify as LGBT. That's less than 1 in 10 people. But then you gotta remember that's the entire LGBT community, so gay is just a smaller percentage. So let's say, if I'm being generous, maybe 4% of Americans are gay. Okay, you are telling me this woman had 2 children. 2! And they both came out with that 4% chance of being gay? Absolutely not. That is a statistical anomaly on top of a statistical anomaly on top of a statistical anomaly. It's just...
It's a gay baby. Gay baby. Gay, gay, gay. Please be gay. Oh! Okay. Be what you want to be. Be what you want to be, but be gay. Okay? Thank you. Right? No pressure. No pressure, but pressure.
I mean, I even heard one mom say, why is it that all of these liberals' children are gay? Am I saying that if you're liberal, your child is going to be gay or trans or whatever? No. But I mean, if you are at such an early time in their formative years, 7 years and younger, taking them to these type of, exposing them to this type of environment and normalizing it and planting seeds in their head that this is maybe a lifestyle they should consider or become immersed in, what are you doing? And do you have your own, I'm going to piss some people off, but I got to say it on behalf of the men, because I know some of the men watching are like, right on, please. Because I know you're dealing with some, all right, like, I know all women are not saints, right? This is not a black or white, like, not all the men are bad and not all the women are good and vice versa, okay? Some of these women do need to be called out and they need to be dealt with. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it here, and if that pisses you off, oh well, okay? Look, in the last segment that I did on the war on women, we talked about how pedophilia, which is now being called MAPS, minor attracted persons, is now becoming normalized. This is it. Take your children to these highly sexualized events. We've got a lot of laws getting passed in the, through the UN on a global international scale, and then more on a state and local level. We saw out in California, other states, and even in the education system, where reports are now coming out that these girls that are having to share public school bathrooms with trans boys, trans girls, I should say, but biological males that they go to school with, they're now avoiding the girls' bathroom at school.
I feel very upset by the situation, that the fact that boys are going to be allowed to go into the girls' bathrooms. I don't think that they should be allowed to be in girls' bathrooms, because it's just, if they're not a girl, then they shouldn't be in there.
Girls go into a bathroom, they tell their parents that, oh, there's a boy in the bathroom, he's a transgender boy, 6 foot tall, you know. The parent contacts the school. The school says, well, that's the policy. If you don't like it, you can use a single-use bathroom, or you can go see the Unified Mental Health Team. Well, wait a minute. So you're telling me that the school gave a boy an accommodation to feel safe and comfortable in the bathroom of the sex he identifies with, but you did not give the girl the accommodation to feel safe and comfortable in the bathroom of her biological sex. That sounds like sex discrimination.
Sure does.
So what I want to see happen is for people to start bringing sex discrimination claims in these instances. Now, you may not be invalidating the policy, but you're going to render the policy pretty toothless when schools start getting hit with sex discrimination claim after sex discrimination claim.
There was one incident that I saw recently in the news where the school said, well, if you don't feel comfortable going to the girls' bathroom, you can come to the nurses' restroom. And now there's a whole line out the side of the nurses' restroom because these little girls do not want to share a bathroom with these boys. And so now they've got another problem on their hands with this. And like I said, if these girls try to confront the boys in the bathroom, we have incident after incident after incident in the news of violence breaking out. These trans women, biological males, brutally attacking females for daring to confront them for using the women's or girls' bathroom. In some extreme cases, I've even heard that some of these little girls have developed urinary tract problems, kidney issues, because they're holding themselves so they don't have to go to the bathroom. What in the world are we doing here? It's just becoming insane. And it's leaving a lot of victims defenseless, like, you know, what we saw with the aggression with Riley Gaines, Posey Parker, and the way that law enforcement handled this, and school officials and all of that, turning a blind eye and in some cases praising the aggressive trans activists. So, you know, why are they doing this? Because what is this, more virtue signaling? Is this about political correctness? Well, I think so, but also, as I mentioned in the last video, I think this has a lot to do with these ESG scores, financially rewarding people.
You have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
There's 3 initiatives that are put down through the World Economic Forum. One is called CEI, one is called ESG, and one is called DEI. These initiatives are put down as social initiatives from the World Economic Forum, the most powerful people on the planet, through the banks to the big corporations. These corporations, unlike my business, actually depend on that financing 100%. So if they don't do the things that these 3 initiatives, the CEI, the ESG, and the DEI say, they actually lose their funding, so they can't operate their business. So you say, well, aren't these people smart enough to understand why they're destroying their business? They can't not do it, because if they don't do it, they won't get their funding. So they can't operate. So they have no choice but to do it. And then they drive their business into the dirt. And here's why that's happening. Because the people who run these companies, the officers of the companies, are not the founders of the companies. These are people that are many generations removed and many degrees of caring about the actual brand removed, all right? So these people are college graduates who think they know a whole bunch of stuff because they have an advanced degree, and they are making decisions that are, you know, basically about the money and thinking that eventually people will adopt this and it will stop. But it's not going to stop, and it's not supposed to stop.
By the way, I just today saw a video of elementary school, or maybe it was middle school, that rainbows everywhere. It's party time, because, you know, being LGBTQ plus is whatever else the acronym, now it's 2S and IA, and my God, it's like a, it's getting crazy. Okay, I can't even keep up with all these. But anyway, they want to make it out like it's fun. It's fun, it's party time. You know, this is, in my day when I was growing up, this is the equivalent of, you know, the guy, you know, rolling up, offering you candy to get into the big metal van, right? Where you are never seen again. This is grooming, this is luring, this is enticing, and it for damn sure is an education, okay? By the way, side rant, people need to understand what the difference is between an education and indoctrination. This is not education. This is indoctrination. Why are we paying for this? A lot of people are like, yeah, homeschool. And this is part of, again, the movement that I talked about earlier on, where I think we are seeing, a movement come out of this where more people are getting into more, a revival to more authentic masculine, feminine roles and taking back control of their children's education.
I told a whole generation of kids, in so many words, these jobs are so unimportant, you don't even get to look at them. Wood shop, metal shop, auto shop, all those things. We just took them right out. We arbitraged them right out of the curricula.
We did that on top of telling a generation of 3, 4, and 5, and 6-year-old, especially little boys, you're the problem. If you can't sit still and shut your mouth for 8 hours and do this worksheet, you are the problem. You need to be pumped full of medication. You need to be set out aside because you're the issue.
These ESG scores and the financial incentives and the potential financial retribution are really the driving force behind these institutions, these corporations, these entities engaging in suicide, financial suicide, basically. We also talked about how this is artificially shaping the culture in a way that causes people to procreate less while deferring more to the authorities. So I do feel like a lot of people are getting caught in the crossfire with this agenda, such as the women who are missing opportunities. We're losing protected spaces. Yes, you have children who are being mutilated, castrated, sterilized irreparably. You will never be able to put that body back the way it was, okay, after you do what they're doing. It's absolutely grotesque and barbaric if you look at the pictures and you look at the facts. And so I'm bringing all this up to say, particularly if you are a man watching this, these are why we need men to stand up, but not in a dylanmulvaney kind of way, okay? We need men to really stand up and take back their masculinity and to defend women. Because obviously we can't fight these trans women, all right? I mean, you can see that with them getting in the ring, boxing these women. You can see that with them taking over women's sports. As I said before, not PC, but totally scientifically correct. Pound for pound, men have more muscle mass than women. That's why we need our protectors and our defenders back. The problem is, we've had an epidemic of failed men, and it's not by accident. It's all by design, if you ask me. And what is keeping men in a failed state, my personal opinion, is all of these little modern catchphrases that we have, these talking points about the patriarchy, toxic masculinity, cis privilege, blah, 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 okay? Which I think are meant to shame men for channeling their masculine energy to the highest potential possible. The current culture right now is promoting men who beta down rather than alpha up. It discourages and shames authentic masculinity as toxic rather than coaching these men or mentoring these men towards channeling their authentic masculinity and directing it in a really constructive way as it was intended, right? Rather than destructive. These are our warriors, okay? Who, yes, have some predator-like qualities, which have a shadow side, just like women have their own shadow aspects, right? But when you channel that in the proper way, we have a good use for this. Like, I want you to use that predator quality or ability that you have within yourself. If we're in a zombie apocalypse, I need you to take that enemy out. I need you, if I hear a bump in the middle of the night, I want you to get up and handle that for me, you know? If we're starving and, you know, it's the zombie apocalypse, okay, or shit hits the fan, right? I need you to be able to go out there and hunt and put some food on the damn table, okay? This is a high use of that predator-like ability that y'all have, the warrior-like ability that you have. But what's happening instead is we have men preying upon women rather than using that energy to protect women. And so, and children, I should say, and providing for them, right? It's not just protecting, it's providing. Also, this competitive spirit that I think men generally naturally have within them, again, going back to psychological studies that date for decades. It's well known that little boys at an early age in life, they have more of a competitive spirit, generally speaking, than little girls do, okay? It's in our DNA, it's in our chromosomes, it's in our physiology. And so what we need is for men to take that natural competitive drive and not use it against other women and children, okay? And Jordan Peterson, by the way, much respect to him, you know, he talks about men integrating their shadow, right? This warrior-like, predatory-like. It's not that you deny or suppress the fact that you have this ability within yourself to take out your enemy, you know? It's that you integrate it and you channel it and direct it in a constructive way so that it doesn't control you or weaken you or leak out of you at really bad times in really bad ways, okay? But what we have right now, in my opinion, is several generations now, even going back to mine, I was experiencing it in my early 20s, where you see this extended adolescence being promoted, where people are in a state of perpetual childhood, or dynamics of this, you know, Peter Pan syndrome, or a man-child, you know. An unfortunate number of men, and yes, even women, had an upbringing that did not afford them lessons on discipline and responsibility, which is particularly bad for men, right? If you are built to go out there and fight and compete and defend and provide, but you don't have any self-discipline and you're irresponsible, how do you do that? You can't. And if you're not able to withstand the adult pressure of this world, this life, I mean, you're just going to recoil and basically try to run back to your little comfort zone, which many of the psychologists talk about, you know, kind of returning, like trying to live in a permanent mother's womb type, having, again, mommy issues, enmeshment, maybe because, again, the single mom epidemic, which I hate to say, yeah, that happened to me. And I'm going to say I try to not be one of those statistics, but it's very hard for a woman to find a man who has actually got discipline and responsibility and has integrated their shadow side, as Jordan Peterson talks about. We have an overabundance of man-children. We have an overabundance of men who have come from single mother homes. They don't have a strong enough identity on their own apart from their mothers. So they're pulling from their mothers. They're wanting to stay with their moms. They're wanting to stay in the comfort and the protection and the nurturing that mothers naturally provide. Again, it's a fantastic thing, but there's a shadow aspect that if you never get out of the mother's womb, if you always want to keep everything cozy and comfortable and you don't want to be exposed to adversity, risk, discomfort, well, then you're kind of a weak man, aren't you? And how does that help women and children? It doesn't. It makes it so that the failure of you as a man, as a leader of a family, as a husband, as a father, you're just kind of doomed to failure. And then when you fall down, the whole family unit does as well. By the way, Jordan Peterson talked about that. He said, you know, statistically, right, there are always exceptions, but statistically, when you have a divorce with children, you're almost doomed. You're practically doomed to a life of poverty, because this economic system is not really designed to support those people. Well, unless they go to the government, and I talked about that in the last video. But let me say that a lot of issues that come out of these men who are coming from these single parent homes, single mother homes, they often are commitment phobic. They have intimacy problems. But most of the commitment phobic behavior, as far as I can tell, is coming from a place of wanting to avoid disappointment, wanting to avoid challenges in life. So they are clinging to the archetype of mother for comfort and convenience. You know, these men with Peter Pan syndrome, as we used to call it back in my day, or the man-child, they are often living in fantasy land, escapism, video games, porn, whatever, largely to avoid anything truly meaningful. So they're gonna chase after the temporary highs, whether it's the things I mentioned, or let's say even drugs, or hookup culture, you know. And this is a way that they choose to cope with a sense of meaninglessness in their life, or a lack of purpose, or a lack of direction in their life, rather than to resolve it conclusively. And in this way, they are fulfilling this childlike, unrealistic ideal that they have in their fantasy life, that it's all pleasure and fun and comfort, but it's void of any risk or loss. It's void of any discomfort or anything that would actually develop or build their character. And I've heard it said that, you know, this is something a psychologist, Jung, would say is the provisional life. This is an over-reliance on the inner world, right? The fantasy land, the escapism, the imagination, where the ego resides in Never Never Land, making development into adulthood nearly impossible. And so why? Because if you were to actually stick to something serious, like a relationship, or I don't know, a job or a career or whatever, you know, that's a challenge, okay? And I've even been hearing a lot of people say, you know, that the strength of a man really is shown in what he's able to endure, his endurance to keep going, the stick-to-itiveness. But oh wait, that's discomfort, that's pain, so we'll just indulge in fantasy land instead. Social failure is really, unfortunately, a major cost to these men. It's the cost of carrying their childish ego into adulthood, according to Carl Jung. Even, you know, Jordan Peterson was saying, well, if you can't get a woman, that's your fault.
They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right. I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well. Well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? You know, are you a liar? If you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, you know, because that's another thing to ask yourself is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? If you were better, you'd be more successful with women. So you have to have that in your mind, and you cannot be angry at women. It's like women being angry at men. It's a sign of psychological trouble.
I'm going to go back to these trans women who identify as lesbians, and, you know, they want to wear a dress and they want to get off on themselves, and that they still want to sleep with women, okay? What's happening here? Is it that you can't get a woman, so you decided to become one? What's going on? And I'm seriously asking this question because, I mean, really, if you want a woman and you desire a woman, but you can't manifest one authentically, then what are you going to do? I mean, if you can't get the original, are you going to try to create a counterfeit within yourself, you know? And I think that this is coming from a place of men being out of alignment with authentic masculinity, and women being out of alignment with authentic femininity. I know that there's a lot of men who have complained about women, and yes, granted, I'm gonna say that some of you have totally valid concerns. You know, there's the whole party girl thing going on, and, you know, getting drunk on the weekends and all of this type of, right, we'll talk about that in a moment. I hear you, I see you if that's what you're bringing up, but I'm going to say, men, you have to understand that women cannot relax into their femininity, which is a very receiving, receptive, allowing type of energy. We can't really come into that if we can't trust men. And if we can't trust men, then what happens is we have to become our own men in our own lives. We have to become our own protectors, our own providers. Hence the statistic that, you know, we now have more women in college than men, and that women are excelling in college more so than men. Like, men are failing and dropping out, a lot of them. Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Why? Because we don't trust men, by and large, to protect us and provide for us. So we're going after that career thinking, you know, I got to make sure that I can get a job and I can pay my bills, because there's, you know, I can't depend on a guy to do that for me. And some of you are like, yeah, I want you to go out and do that, but you got to understand, when I'm trying to be in boss mode and, you know, be in this masculine energy of initiating and instigating and competing and protecting and defending and providing, you know, I can't do my feminine, right? I can't, not with excellence. And it's something that, you know, I think men need to connect the dots on. Many men, unfortunately, they are seeking women who work these days. And I will, in all fairness, say, you know, I can kind of understand why. It is a challenge. I mean, since the 1950s, it's been a downhill spiral. We've gone into this economy where a dual income has become almost a necessity. You're not going to survive. You're not going to make it in this day and age without a dual income household. Whereas you go all the way back into the 50s, you would have a man who could support a family of 4 on his own. He could have, you know, own a car, own a house on a high school diploma back in the 1950s. A lot has changed since then, which should let you know we're in the middle of an economic war. We've been going through economic warfare, but I digress. The point is that if a woman has to step into this masculine role, then she cannot fully embody the feminine role. And so, right, I said that in the last video, you can't be the best mother or wife without the support to do so, because you're having to also act as father in the family. And I know this firsthand. I've lived it, okay? Not by choice, but by force. I'm putting it out there to get any men that are watching to really ask yourselves, what are you doing to protect women and provide for women so they can relax and allow more that feminine supportive role toward you, okay? There's research out there showing it, and like I said, I've lived it firsthand. It's a lie that you can have it all. Well, maybe you can, just not all at once, okay? There is a very small window of opportunity for you to raise your kids. But if you just focus on your career instead, you could really miss it, and it is going to come at a cost. And that's the reality that I think a lot of men and women who are into this dual income, non-traditional corporate career climbing, they kind of miss the boat on that. And you've got to realize there's a cost for everything. I think that's something that popular culture doesn't want to discuss. And it might also be like a sober reality, sober pill to swallow, okay, a sober reality check for men. And I'm not bringing it up to blame men at all. Like I said, I think there's bigger things going on, like with the economy, that are putting social pressure on families. But I do feel like men need to realize that they have more power than they realize, and they need to really step into that power. And this is not about them just empowering themselves, but doing it to also empower others, namely women and children in their lives.
What do women look for? Depends on the wisdom of the woman, obviously, but, well, it does, because, you know, narcissists can fool naive women. That's why narcissists propagate, by the way. And we know this because young women are more likely to fall for narcissistic psychopaths. And the reason for that is they can't tell them from competent men, because narcissistic psychopaths imitate competence, and that's their niche. And so they have a confidence that isn't justified by their ability. But the women check out the confidence as a marker of ability, and the falsely confident can fool them, especially if they're young and naive.
So I want to speak to the men who are frustrated with women. I want to ask you to please be compassionate and realize that the same attack that's been on men has also been on women, as I expressed in the last video. The stereotypical single mom with 3 baby daddies, you know, the gold diggers, all of that. Yes, you know, these type of drunks in the club every weekend, can't cook a meal, can't clean a house, can't make a house a home. too busy being a boss bitch, you know, this type of thing, doesn't need a man, you know, this stereotypical, right?
What do you bring to the table?
Everything. I got 2 kids, you know what I mean? So everything. If you're willing to provide for my kids, then everything.
Everything like what?
My kids, my life, my mental health, everything is like everything. Everything you want to know about me, I'll bring to the table for sure.
Those kind of women, unfortunately, I'm not going to argue with you and tell you that she's your woman. She's not. Okay, she's not going to be able to play a supportive role in your life as you are supporting her. You have to stay away from these women. Yes, they are toxic, and I've outlined the reasons why. These are the casualties of the war on women, okay? But the good news is that I think you have more power than you realize. And you just got to step into it, and you have to accept the challenge to speak the truth to these toxic women and basically let them know you're not marriage material, honey. You're not. But in the meantime, you got to stop using women, all right? Stop using them as your footrest. No excuses, all right? And I feel like that's what is going on. And I'm not necessarily saying you're doing it, but a lot of men are. They're just like, she's not marriage material, but she's a this will do for now material. And they use women.
Pick a better comeback, because this one ain't working no more. You incels are so quick to come inside of people's comment sections to drag single mothers instead of holding the men accountable who made them single mothers. Pick better men, pick better men. Bullshit. How about you add something more productive or constructive? How about males start holding other males accountable for treating women like shit? How about males start holding their friends accountable for abandoning their children because the baby mama doesn't want to sleep with them anymore? How about men start shaming the men that walked away and abandoned their families because the single mother, who y'all keep loving to drag, she's the one that stayed and then gets penalized for it.
And what I find, again, coming from a female perspective, what is all too common in my experience is that a lot of men tend to regard women as objects of entertainment and pleasure, rather than viewing them as vessels through which they can spread their seed through eternity, right? This is an empowering perspective shift that I wish more men would step into, where they become more intentional about their life and they infuse their partnerships with a sense of purpose and meaning, and they start making decisions with their life from more of a generational view, more looking at their legacy that they're leaving. Not just for their own namesake, but for their children and their grandchildren, understanding that if they fail, so does the rest of the bloodline. It's not just with you, right? It's with the family, it's with the bloodline. And please stop stereotyping women. We are not all gold diggers. Yes, we do, generally speaking, value security, but don't get it twisted. Yes, some women get into a shadow aspect where they're totally gold diggers. But most women, they just want stability and security. That's why they're concerned about your money. They're concerned about where you work, and are you able to stay on a job, and are you responsible, and are you dependable? Have you demonstrated some mastery in your career? Yes, there are women who have unrealistic expectations out of a man's earning, particularly in this day and age. I'm not going to lie or deny that. Okay, that's a real problem that needs to get addressed.
What would you want his income to be? I feel like this is going to sound bad. I feel like 300,000.
I would have to say 127. Probably 150 to $250,000 a year.
$500,000?
Is that bad?
150, maybe to 250,000 a year would be comfortable for sure.
I was just having this conversation with my friend, and she was like, you have to manifest a husband, girl. Ideally, my husband needs to be making like 650,000.
So you said you want 500K, but what do you think the median income is for a 30-year-old?
60K? 70K?
It is $45,000.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah.
I think it's 250,000.
It's 52,000.
What? No, it's not. Damn, America.
It's not greedy. She's not being a gold digger to want you to go to work, stay on a job, and pay for your dang kids. Okay. She's wanting to probably have kids if she's of that age. And we women, we want to have children with somebody, ideally, who can pay for it. Unless you're toxic, like I mentioned earlier, you don't need to be dealing with those women. If you are the single mom of a son, please recognize your ability to influence your son. for better or worse. Your influence is actually pretty strong. Women in general have a very strong ability to influence men, again, for better or worse, but realize that men are not women, okay? They need real challenges from time to time in order to grow. They also need women. You know, there are all kinds of studies out there showing that men who never marry and settle down, men who are alone, bachelors, their lifespan, their quality of life is less without a woman in it. There's been a saying that men are also savages on their own, right? Going back to what I was talking before, they are naturally wired to be the hunters, the warriors, but women are here to help civilize them. And without women, it's said that men's lives are often quite dehumanized, right? Prisons, military warfare, gangs, things like that. Again, if they don't have a good, strong, positively influential woman in their life to help civilize them. But I think that, again, going back to if you have a son and you're a single mom, or regardless of whether or not you're single, you should expect that your son work and stick with it. No scrubs, no scrubs. Expect him to demonstrate commitment, discipline, responsibility. Teach him to see being industrious as a virtue and having resilience as a virtue, and regarding games as something that are for children. And I'm just going to say this, my own personal preference and belief. No video games, right? I'm sorry, but if you have a grown-ass man in your house and he's playing video games, yeah, games are for children, okay? Encourage your son also to have his own identity apart from yours. This is healthy individuation, right? Encourage him to socialize with others while not losing himself in group think. Encourage him to have a spiritual life as well so that he can develop a moral compass and develop his character, okay? Develop his sense of self and have a discernment of right versus wrong, becoming more self-aware and actualizing more of his true authentic self. And I think also if you can expose him obviously to some male mentors, some strong male voices, some thought leaders on masculinity, this would be a positive thing to do. If you can't do it, you know, in person, offline, do it online. For example, like I said before, have him watch, you know, some Jordan Peterson videos, or Robert Greene is somebody I've been watching a lot more lately. I really respect Robert Greene. The MF CEO, you can figure out what MF means, right? I could go on. There's a lot more, but they're out there. This is the point. And you can find these good, positive, strong male mentors, but you have to seek them out. I'm even following somebody, they're everywhere. They're following somebody on Instagram who's got a podcast called The Art of Manliness. And I'm following an account on Instagram called Chainless Masculinity, all right? So they're out there. In short, what I'm trying to encourage is that we not accommodate a refusal to grow up and man up. I think we culturally need to get clear on what toxic masculinity actually is. I would say it would be like the fake alphas trying to personify being successful when they're really not, and they're going after, you know, they're lying, they're faking, it's ego, self-focus, self-interest, insecurity, projecting some I've got this together when they really don't. That's toxic masculinity. And again, I think if you're listening to voices like Jordan Peterson, that's going to clear it up, okay? But I think something we also have to consider for men is that there's no longer a rite of passage for men in our culture. You know, you have historically, there have been, say, in tribes, you know, there were initiation ceremonies where, you know, men were released into adulthood, okay? And now you have this situation with young men where the parents ideally should be preparing and releasing these young men for adulthood, but there's a failure to do that, and there's a failure consequently to launch, okay? Whether you are the mother or father of a man, I think you got to ask yourself, there has been a failure for your son to launch. Where did you drop the ball? Where did you make it too easy? Where did you make it too comfortable for Johnny to stay in fantasy land, okay? In comfort zone. How can you prepare and release your sons into adulthood. Jordan Peterson talks about how with men, they need a little bit more help along these ends than, say, women, because he argues that women instinctively know their purpose, right? We know that we are here to give life and nurture life. Granted, not all of us are walking in it. War on women, casualties, right? But many of us know at some level, instinctively. Jordan Peterson argues men have to be shown and they have to learn. And if they don't, this is going to lead a lot of men down the road of addictions, whether it's chemical or sexual or adrenaline junkies or however, addictions to cope with a lack of meaning and purpose in life. So men have to be shown and they have to learn. And I'm definitely not blaming men, because there's a lot of positive ones out there. But I mean, you got to really have a mind to seek them out and listen to them. But I would say like Matt Walsh's, the Jordan Petersons, the Richard Grannons, they are teaching men how to alpha up rather than beta down. They're teaching men to also utilize their darker side for good. And I think that these are the men that are really setting a standard that I wish more men would embrace. And even supporting men like Dave Rubin, who is a homosexual, okay? He's not straight. The Gays Against Groomers community, same as well. I mean, I follow Ollie London and Andy No on Twitter, and these are all gay men who are actually showing that being homosexual doesn't have to look and sound like a loss of masculinity. You don't have to get into this kind of mental illness aspect of it, or being a faux lesbian, or engaging in MAPS. That is not what this movement should be. I think we need to make some important distinctions on, where do we draw the line on these things, these movements, okay? I mean, at what point does this get into mental illness? And no, just because you are not straight does not mean that you're mentally ill. But, on the same token, we need to understand that some of these people in this community have legitimate mental health issues that need to get dealt with, and they shouldn't get a free pass because they're wearing a rainbow pen or whatever, We also have to realize what this is costing us, not just on an interpersonal level, but when we've got a nation full of beta males, right? Apart from the whole mental illness argument, let's just say weak men. I recently saw a video where Candace Owens was talking about how we're now the laughing stock of the world. Our enemies are laughing at us because, as she mentioned, we Americans at this time in history, we can't even figure out what kind of bathroom to use. I mean, that's how they look at us. That's how foreigners look at us. I mean, and think about it. If you were trying to rule or subdue a nation, if you were trying to overtake a nation, this is exactly what you would do. You would weaken the men. You would leave the women and children defenseless, without any protection, without any provision. And that's why I'm going to go back to what I said in the last, right? You could call me a tinfoil hatter. I don't really care at this point, because I got a track record at this point, since 2020 of being correct on these things, all right? I'm just going to go back to what I said before. I really believe this is a psyop. I think that what is happening right now is that we are being targeted by cultural Marxism, where they're essentially trying to break down the cultural identity of Americans, the traditional family, gender relations. And what is happening is that the weakest, most disempowered members of our society, of our culture, yes, people who are mentally ill, people who feel like they're the black sheep of the family or whatever, the aliens, the weirdos, the rejected, the dejected, whatever, they are being used through the psychological operation to attack those of us who have been culturally empowered or are seen in a place of empowerment, right? Like when you hear them talk about white privilege or cis privilege, that we're not dealing with the discrimination and the hate crimes and blah, blah, blah that they're victim to. Well, now we're being targeted with the animosity, the hostility, the aggression, and they want us fighting each other. They really do. And these people are not really recognizing that they're being used. They're being used as pawns in a rich man's profitable head game. I go back to BlackRock, Larry Fink, ESG, all of that, okay?
This is what people are failing to realize. What's happening is we are dealing with a communist insurgency that is undermining the values and the identity of the American public. What they are doing is they are intentionally creating a scenario where the American people rejecting this initiative is actually hurting iconic American brands that remove much of the American identity. So when you name these companies off, all of these companies represent America when you think of them traditionally. So now they're removing part of the identity, which is part of the communist process called demoralization. If there's less identity in America, there's less to fight for, which makes it easier to conquer, all right? Then on top of it, one of the goals of communism is to create two classes of people, very poor and very rich. And so what they're doing here is they are getting the American public to cancel their own companies that actually hurts their own neighbors who are good, hardworking American people, because the people at Bud Light at the top are not the ones feeling the pain here. It's the delivery drivers. It's the hardworking red, white, and blue Americans that believe the same motherfucking shit that you all believe, who are getting fired or laid off or losing because of this. So they have run an operation to push this initiative down through the companies intentionally, where the companies cannot resist it because they're required to do so for their funding, knowing that the American people are going to reject it and destroy these companies, creating the lower class system that they're trying to create in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk about some solutions, because, you know, I don't want to just talk the problem, but hopefully we've done enough of that to where we're at a place of agreement about what the actual damn problem is, so we know how to solve it, or at least you can hear me out, okay? I think number one, we have got to address the emasculation of men, okay? And I'm not just talking about psychologically, but also biologically, all right? We've got an epidemic of low testosterone, estrogen dominance in our culture. We've got men who are, and women as well, who are taking in a lot of what's called endocrine disruptors that throw off hormonal balance, okay? I even recently, side note, saw a video about a young woman, like 26, 27, supposedly going through premature menopause at an age when she should be at the peak of her fertility, right? It's downhill from there, okay? But actually what they're saying is it's not menopause per se, it's a ovarian failure. Anyway, the point is, men and women are both dealing with this, but we're seeing sperm rates plummeting, fertility plummeting. Why is this suddenly happening? That you have men in their prime have a fraction of the fertility and testosterone levels that men twice their age had how many decades ago, you know? And you have some men who are becoming aware of this and trying to supplement testosterone, but I've been hearing the trans community that it's easier for them to get help with their hormone supplementation, but not biological men and women who legit are dealing with LowT, estrogen dominance, or menopause, okay? Let's talk about endocrine disruptors. I think a lot of us know to stay away from the BPA that's in water bottles, plastic food packaging. I'm also hearing reports now that some of these endocrine disruptors, BPAs, are in even clothes, like synthetic clothing that's like wicking type athletic wear. Brands like Nike, North Face are said to have some of this in their clothing, which ironically, those were a couple companies that were part of getting boycotted from this whole woke agenda. So I find that kind of an interesting synchronicity there. Also, you know, reports about how heating things up in plastics, or like microwaving foods in plastics, are, you know, the plastics have phytoestrogens, and it's just leaching off into your food when you microwave it, when you heat it. It's like liquid plastic that you're eating, basically. Things like, say, ramen noodles that come in a disposable cup. This is something like you want to stay away from. And I think what I've known about for quite some time that is pretty prevalent, that most people just don't even think about, but it's really serious in my opinion, is the meat supply has so many hormones in it, whether we're talking dairy or, you know, the beef, the cattle. And so for that reason, you know, I would say if you want to get these hormones, these synthetic hormones that are messing up your own hormonal balance. You want to get that out of your system. You got to buy organic, grass-fed, grass-finished, if possible, meat, and buy, you know, dairy that it does not have these human growth hormones in it. Also, like avoiding aluminum in deodorants, and you know, switching out your plastic food storage bags and your plastic wraps for things that are like silicone and glass containers, things like that, and avoid like cooking with like plastic cooking utensils, or even these non-stick pans. You want to get rid of that, full of toxins. Even the inside, I used to have a Keurig for a long time, and I got off of that because these black plastics on the inside of the coffee machine are leaching, especially when you put the heated water through there. It's leaching these plastics into what you're drinking. And so get rid of all of that. Switch to, like, if your cookware, you know, stainless steel, cast iron, even like the enamel coated cast iron. I love that, by the way. That's a good alternative to the nonstick. But ironically, you know, the Bud Light boycott, well, a lot of people were talking about how good riddance, because for men, might think it's macho, but actually that alcohol is an endocrine disruptor. You hear a lot of people, you know, joking, cracking jokes about soy boys, but, you know, soy in tofu or soy milk, it actually contains phytoestrogens that mimic estrogen and are giving, and, you know, estrogen dominance is putting estrogen in the food supply for these men, and it's not helpful. You know, they're getting the weight gain around the midsection, they're getting the man boobs, right? And so I've even heard people also talk about avoiding the artificial fragrances that are in candles, cleansers, opt for the essential oils instead, because those have endocrine disruptors. And even like detergents that you clean your clothes with, opt for something natural and organic. I mean, I could go on a whole long bunny trail, make a whole nother video about this. I don't want to get too, I've already given a lot of time to it, but I do want to say, you know, to make it very simple, right? Because if I list everything, that it's everywhere, right? It's a lot. You'd be like, oh my God, how do I even live? Here's how you live in a nutshell. You buy natural and organic as much as possible. You stay away from the synthetics, right? Like with the clothing, buy cotton, buy linen, buy wool, buy things like natural, not synthetic fibers. And the same with, you know, the foods that you're eating, and the cleansers that you're using, and the hygiene products that you're using as well. And I have heard, you know, that there are some supplements that can be taken to enhance testosterone naturally in addition to doing these things, but absolutely lay off of the endocrine disruptors, because I'm hearing some people say that, you know, the average American is eating or ingesting the equivalent of a credit card a day worth of plastic. And all these plastics add up. There is a bioaccumulation of that in your system. And that not only affects you physically, but also emotionally through, for the men, mood swings, low drive, whether we're talking about sex drive or having a competitive drive in life. It also makes you kind of weak-willed, undisciplined, unmotivated, conflict avoidant. It could cause you to become easily tired in the middle of the day, and just kind of, you know, maybe a little bit limp-wristed in the bedroom. Like, you know, I'd rather just get off on porn culture than actually, you know, go have sex with, you know, a real woman and have a real relationship, because damn, that takes effort, that takes risk, that takes discomfort. And here we go with the LowT culture, right? The other thing I want to say is that we just need to embrace authentic masculinity. I've been saying it all along, but really encouraging men to become the best versions of themselves at their highest potential, coming from a true nature, right? Having more mastery and leadership, becoming protectors, becoming providers, knowing that if we don't do this as a nation, we become weak. And this is not a good thing, all right? We need to have our warriors strong. We need to have our men strong, because they are a nation's first line of self-defense for women and children. And I think also we need to have more of a moral compass in a culture that, as I said in the last segment, has become demoralized by design. This is not about being religious, as I said before. It's about discerning that some things are not good for you. They might feel good, they might look good, they might be trendy, they might seem cool, but having the discernment, the wisdom to know that it leads you down a dead-end road and it results in people being hurt unnecessarily, and you coming to an understanding that although this might feel good in the moment or seem good, it's really not in the best interest of all people involved, and there are bad outcomes and consequences to certain behaviors that create unnecessary pain and suffering that is just better off avoided. I think that each of us individually has to figure out where we draw the line. What are we willing to stand for? We're going to fall for anything. I mean, if you don't stand against, right, let's say, men wearing women face, which is arguably appropriating womanhood, turning us into a caricature, mocking us, okay, then, do you draw the line on teaching other children to do the same thing, which is basically what's going on with Target and their, marketing? And if it's not that, then it is not on maps. Are you going to wait until, that becomes the new hate crime, that you can't speak out against minor attracted persons, because that would be discriminatory? We have to let maps people into children's restrooms, because if you don't let that happen, then you're a hateful discriminator. I mean, at what point do you draw the line on this? Bestiality? Where do we go, And I hate to bring that up here, but it's like, you have to ask yourself, how passive are you willing to be in order to practice this so-called inclusivity and kindness, which I would argue, if this is cultural Marxism going on, what's happening is that people, the positive aspects of American culture, which is our openness, our freedom-lovingness, is being used against us, okay? You have to figure out at what point is it not okay, right? I mean, you make a decision every night when you go to bed that you're going to lock your doors and windows, right? Because, you do want to have from time to time people come over and visit, but there's certain people you don't want in your house, right? And this is along the same lines. At what point do you lock it up and say, no, you may not have entry into this, you may not have access into this, and I don't care if it hurts your feelings or, if you think I'm being unkind. So it's not only a question of where do you draw the line, but who is helping you to decide this? Are you deciding this within yourself, your own moral compass? Or are you letting the culture, the ever-changing culture, what's trending today, but maybe not tomorrow, are you letting that decide and define you and where you draw the line? Another thing I want to suggest is that there is more pushback individually out of each of us on the psyops. This is, the psychological operations, the social engineering that's going on. Because I think that we need to stop this knee-jerk reaction that someone must be gay or trans if they don't do XYZ, or if they're doing XYZ, oh, you must be gay or you must be trans. Let's get you a tuckini, or let's put you in a binding bra because, oh, you need to come out of the closet, blah, blah, blah. Listen, again, Gen X here, I come from a generation where, in the 80s, men had these hair bands, and they had big long hair with hairspray, and they would wear tights and eyeliner, and no one said, oh, I bet they're in the closet, I bet they're actually gay. I mean, they were straight men who were writing these extravagant, powerful love ballads to straight women, and everybody knew it. We didn't automatically put them in a you must be gay or trans box, okay? We've got to stop this knee-jerk reaction that has now become normal, where, people are saying, oh, well, you must be this, that, or the other, and then also, just cowering to this politically correct culture. Side note, I remember back in the day, again, how many couple decades ago, we could laugh about this kind of stuff, and you wouldn't get outed, you wouldn't get canceled, you wouldn't be called a discriminator. It was perfectly normal for us to laugh about these things. And suddenly it's not. Like, think about, I remember Saturday Night Live had Pat, and that was, somebody who was I guess what you would call non-binary, like we don't know if they're gender fluid, like are you a man or a woman? And every episode it was trying to figure out, is Pat a man or a woman? And the confusion that was going on with people because they couldn't figure it out. And we would have a good laugh about this. And I remember when I was in high school, In Living Color had you know, the men in film and Jim Carrey, who were doing skits that now would be considered, you know, hateful and transphobic. And why are we allowed to laugh anymore about these things? Why are we not allowed to laugh about the truth anymore? I think you got to really ask yourself what's going on here with this kindness cult and this pressure to be kind about things that in reality are just kind of like, I don't know, a couple decades ago, people would agree, yeah, like that's weird. And again, if you try to point out the obvious and the truth that everybody's thinking and everybody knows, well, you are being told we don't discriminate, thereby implying that you do, and bringing up gaslighting, which I talked about in the last video, where we've got this pronoun cult, you know, online. Like let's say on LinkedIn, if you were looking for a job, if you're trying to get on in a corporation, I mean, they are pressuring people these days to identify their pronouns, their sexual orientation in job applications. It's unreal. Again, my generation is like, what in the hell is going on? What do my pronouns and sexual orientation have anything to do with me being a professional? This is just, it's gotten crazy, okay? And people asking these kind of questions on a job application and a job interview, completely inappropriate. But the fact that we now have a culture where people feel completely at ease, they don't see anything wrong with asking about your sexual orientation or your pronouns for a job application, we have a serious cultural problem. We need to push back on this type of stuff. And I say don't engage in it, okay? Because I think that there's a lot of pressure. I'm seeing it within the schools as well, you know, where if you don't go along with the rainbow movement and parroting little mantras like, oh, people being born this way, despite, by the way, there's no science to back that up, okay? And you're being pressured also culturally to respect dead name, right? Or you're hurting somebody's feelings if you call them basically by their name they were born with, and not their chosen name with their chosen gender, okay? Then you are being accused of, again, discrimination and being hateful. Why? Against people who have rejected who they are authentically, rejected because they killed off the pre-trans version of themselves. Side note, I said it before, I'm going to say it again, this is similar to the convid rhetoric that we were exposed to, the peer pressure that we were exposed to in 2020 and 2021, that, you know, you're a sociopath, you're a grandma killer if you don't do XYZ that they prescribe to everybody, okay? We have to speak out against this. We have to raise awareness on the truth of so-called gender affirming care, which I would say it's disaffirming. Personally, if you are having to chemically, surgically mutilate and castrate somebody, causing them to be sterile, causing them to have osteoporosis in their 20 sweet Jesus, the suicide rates as well. Oh my gosh. This is not affirming at all. This is a play on words is what it is. It's exactly, this is very Orwellian speech. The exact opposite of what they say they're doing is what's happening. Because you look at people like, let's say, Bruce Reamer. I don't know if y'all know about him, but this was, by the way, this was a botched circumcision that this guy went through, where he was forced to go through gender reassignment surgery. And it is a horrific story of him ending up committing suicide. There are more stories out there like his of even people who were legitimately born intersex, where they have both male, females, which is exceedingly rare, but in those cases where they put those babies, those children through gender reassignment surgery, they find that these children, they're not functional sexually. And now we've got a lot of research coming out, more current research showing that these boys who have undergone the gender reassignment surgery, they have never been able to orgasm.
President of WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, admitting on camera that literally none of the boys who started on puberty blockers at 10 or stage 2, which is the beginning of puberty when they're maybe 11 years old, none of them as adults have had any sexual function. They've never been able to have an orgasm. So they are turning children They're destroying their future adult sexual function. They're sterilizing them. They are maiming them. They're destroying their chance of having a family and reducing their future dating pool to essentially zero.
Wow.
And we are to call this love and inclusion. We're supposed to be silent about this? No. Parents need to speak up. Everyone needs to speak up. And we need the body positive message that our kids are beautiful just as they are. No puberty blockers, hormones, or scalpels needed.
A lot of people just want to tolerate it and say this is fine.
Tolerate what? Tolerate what? Castration and double mastectomies for 13-year-olds?
Well, yeah,
no,
or
seriously,
oh, yeah.
man.
Yeah.
That's not tolerance. That's crossed the line. That is not tolerance. That is an inexcusable silence on the part of the majority, the vast majority, who knows this to be wrong in the deepest possible sense. Most of the bloody Nazi propaganda that led to the extermination policies at the beginning of World War II were predicated initially on compassion and tolerance. So this whole, we're being compassionate and tolerant, it's like, no you're not. You're aiding and abetting the surgical mutilation of minors. That is not compassionate, and it's not tolerant.
I would say that we are probably in years, decades to come, going to find out that this resulted in an increase of suicides. I've already seen it. I've already seen the stories of young men who have gone through the surgery and could not, maybe prior to the surgery, they were like sex addicts. They were orgasming at least once a day, if not multiple times a day. And then post the surgery, not one orgasm a year later, and they end up with their partner who transitioned with them and can't orgasm either. These people are being mutilated, sterilized, rendered dysfunctional sexually. By the way, I think as people become a lot more aware of this, it is going to bring about a revival of bodily autonomy. And understanding that, yes, and I would take it even down to the circumcision, intactivism, right? That if it's not okay to circumcise females, I know I'm kind of getting a little off road here, but if it's not okay to circumcise females, it's not okay to circumcise males. And I don't want to get off into that. I don't want to make this into a totally different topic about that, but my God, that's a big one, right? I think that more people are going to, in the coming years and decades, become aware of the need to respect intactivism, bodily autonomy. I want to encourage people to stand up for bodily autonomy and authenticity, and I talk more about this in my astrology videos for those interested in how the energies affect us. But I will say that I think that astrologically speaking, without getting too deep into that, right, there's a lot of energies that are pushing an increased focus on this issue of bodily autonomy and personal authority over the next year and a half because of the North Node going into Aries. All right. So I'm going to close out with this prediction is, you know, we have a lot of problems we've discussed here and a lot of solutions we've discussed as well. But I do believe that this backlash that we're seeing during Pride Month in June is bringing about a revival of traditional roles and a return to natural law. Because frankly, the truth is that polarity is required for attraction. If you're in this kind of gray zone, attraction doesn't really happen. And that's what a lot of people don't want to talk about. You do need a polarity for there to be attraction, a healthy amount of tension, okay? For there to be sexual attraction. And most of us know this. We don't have to be told this, but there's some people who, again, maybe they're struggling and there's something about themselves authentically, their own authenticity that they have rejected or denied within themselves, or they've got unhealed hurts. They need help with that, okay? But I think a lot of people are going to just go even harder at embracing what many of us already know to be true, that the best life is the authentic life, and embracing our differences and making the most out of them and getting some help for those who are struggling with this, people who have unresolved anger issues and hostility and resentment toward the opposite sex, people that maybe are high functioning on the autistic spectrum disorder scale. These people are being preyed upon, arguably, by cultural Marxists. and they are rejecting their authentic selves. So we need to, in this revival, return to a place where we're teaching children at a young age, yes, in their formative years, and if you got to do it in a homeschool environment, more power to you. But teach these children there's nothing wrong with them, and that they're not a mistake, and they do not need big pharma or big med to fix them and be patients for life, okay? Because if we don't stop this now, I just don't think that history is going to look back upon this time very well. This is going to result in a lot of suicides, and I think it's going to come out that the most vulnerable people in our population with mental health issues and arguably physical issues, they were being groomed, they were being manipulated, and ultimately mutilated, castrated. It is a very sad state of affairs. We need to take the risk of being viewed as discriminators or hateful to do the loving thing, and that is to speak the truth. All right, so that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I know it's been a long one, but I've had a lot of enjoyment putting this out there. And like I said, if you want to help me reach more people, please share, and thank you for the likes and the kind messages in my email. And make sure, like I said, if you missed the War on Women, watch it here. And until next time, I'm wishing you all the best. Be blessed.